Because the black race is not oppressed because they are black. The black race is oppressed because they have been denied the source of dignity, which is their economic labor, their collective economic labor, their natural resources. This is why they are poor. That is what they are poor, because they are being robbed.
And nobody likes us. Everybody hates us, Brother Booker. Everybody hates us.
I have met very warm Chinese. I've met Indian. Very warm white
Everybody
people.
Hates us. Everybody wants
that is another
to colonize Africa.
That is another narrative.
Everybody wants Africa to themselves, apart from the Africans.
That's
peace and blessings, everybody. I am your brother Orina, all the way from the motherland, all the way from Kenya, Nairobi, nation's capital. Welcome to SELL Africa to Africans, the home of Pan-African nationalism. Well, today we have a special guest. He is the Secretary General of the Communist Party Marxist Kenya. I've been watching him for quite some time, and I'm really excited to have him on the show. We're going to talk about what communism really means, what socialism means, the difference, and what the Communist Party Marxist of Kenya is fixing to do in the near future, and the work that they're doing currently now, and also the differences between us Pan-African nationalists and black socialists. Where do we differ, and where can we work together? So, guys, please welcome Booker Omole. Comrade, how are you?
I'm okay. Thank you very much.
It's an honor to have you to SELL Africa to Africans. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and it's a pleasure to speak to, we call it an alternative progressive media.
Yeah.
Most of the media out there is captured. Mm-hmm. So when we get an opportunity to have a discussions of this magnitude, we don't take it for granted.
We don't. Mm-hmm. We can't take it for granted, Booker. And we this is why independent media like I don't like calling them podcasts. Mm-hmm. Well, mine is not a podcast. It's more than that. Mm-hmm. But media channels outside of KTN, Citizen, and TV are very, very important, because they are not regulated. We are not subjected to Communications Authority of Kenya. We can do whatever we want. We can invite whoever we want, and we can say whatever we want. That's the beauty of it. But thank you for coming. And I think when people see the thumbnail and they see the title, there's a word that will really, really kind of either scare people or confuse people, and that's communism. Mm. If you can, I think we can start from there, Booker. What is the meaning of communism, and what's the difference between communism and socialism?
Yeah. First of all, you have to know that communism as a political conception mm-hmm. has a lot of history, and it also develops. Communism is not a static theoretical formulation that needs to be followed in a dogmatic way. And when we go to the history of the African people, mm-hmm. remember, especially myself, I've also committed a lot of time to study anthropological phenomena of different African countries mm-hmm. and different African tribes, particularly my tribe, which is Luo tribe. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the biggest pieces of work was written by Professor Bethuel Ogot, The Nile Civilization, to see how the Luo community migrated along the Nile and finally settled around Lake Victoria. And if you look at even though I don't believe that this book was written by Jomo Kenyatta, but also I think one of the classics of Agikuyu anthropology was Facing Mount Kenya by Jomo Kenyatta.
You don't think it was written by Mzee Jomo?
Because of its ferocity in terms of intellectualism and also in terms of its progressiveness, because Jomo Kenyatta was a big sellout of our independence.
Yes, he was.
And we do not see, but you know, that as it may, we still reconsider that book as a masterpiece in terms of understanding one of the primary ethnic groups and how they lived their life. But in our Communist Party Marxist, we analyze that there is a stage in the African development that we lived under what the West call primitive communalism, but as we call it, advanced communalism. That before the white man arrived, or before the Imperial Britain arrived in Kenya to colonize us, we were living unfettered life full of abundance in what we may call advanced communalism. And even certain features of government had already started to, to form, because we had in the coastal region and even in our neighbors like Uganda now, then it was one massland. We also had the kingdom. So you realize that at that time, Africa was living in abundance. We did not have the classes had not developed much in the African continent. Land was in abundance. It was not scarcity. But the forced, settler economy that was put up upon the African people led to acceleration of development of class disparities, where we have now the African population that was really landless and also actually condemned into a way only to selling labor to the white plantation farms. And we could now see that the African as a continent had now certain inequalities within the context, and we could see such similarities with the development of the Europe and all the other contexts. So when we talk about communism, it is the solid desire for even people to live under a world of equality, a classless world where we say to each according to his need and from each according to his ability. But that's a perfect world can only be achieved when we have abundance. So we are saying that even though Africa had never lived under communism, but the what we call the advanced communalism in the African continent, it's akin to the communist society that we desire as the African people. But now in terms of classical scientific correct definition is that communism is indeed the doctrine of the scientific doctrine of the total liberation of the oppressed majority, particularly the working class, and in general, the working class and the peasants. This is our view. But also, what about socialism? In fact, you cannot be a communist and then fail to be a socialist, because we see socialism as indeed a transition towards communism. Because in socialism, we realize that there are still certain inequalities that still exist in the society that need to be addressed through what we call the power of the state. So, for example, in a socialist society, like we have never had a communist society in the globe. Indeed, we've had several experiments of socialism building towards communism. So socialism is it's like a stage towards communism. And even in terms of our struggle here in Kenya, we don't even see the reality of socialism without completing our independence. Because only free people can start the urgent task of building socialism. And that is why the Communist Party Marxist Kenya said that without economic sovereignty, without Kenyans for the Kenyan people, without Africa for the African people, we cannot move to the second stage, which is a socialist construction towards communism. In fact, in Kenya today, the Communist Party Marxist Kenya identified the primary enemy or the primary aggressor as mainly, foreign interests. Those foreign interests are domiciled in Washington, and we say that the primary aggressor is the United States imperialism. And our duty as revolutionaries here in Africa is first to complete our independence. Only when we are free men and women, free people as African, without external interference, and if we can now start through a totally liberated African continent to now associate with other, geographical localities as equals within the mutual respect, then we could say that the desire to build socialism can indeed start. So even here, as the Communist Party Marxist, we recognize that the fight for independence and to return the Kenyan project to the Kenyan people is the most important task first. Then from there, then we can start to build socialism, because socialism, we say, from each according to his ability and also to each according to his contribution. That means it appreciates that the working class, who are the makers of wealth, will also have to benefit from the wealth they have created and also make decisions on what that wealth can be used.
Yeah. So what are the ways that, for example, Africa can apply socialism in our African economy?
You see, there are several socialist experiments that have existed also in African continent that have also helped us in terms of really helping us to develop our understanding as the African people. Essentially, I could mention one of the greatest thinkers, Milka Cabral, on the weapon of theory.
Yes.
I could mention Thomas Sankara. I could even go as far as mention Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. I can mention Kwame Nkrumah. I could even mention Agustino Neto. What I'm trying to put through, and there is one of the greatest classic of our time by Walter Rodney, which he actually articulated the relevance of Marxism towards the African liberation movements. This is important for us because socialism as a depiction of the future of a class society is that as long as the globalized capitalism exists, which is imperialism, the world will continue to divide itself between the haves and the have-not. So there is no neutrality in terms of socialism. In fact, socialism is a biased doctrine that only, is the light or the compass for the oppressed people. We cannot say that socialism is indeed, a class neutral. No, it's actually class biased. So the future of the national liberation movements in our country or in African continent were captured. But in a nutshell, the future of the national liberation movement were actually more, more towards socialism than communism. And I could give you an example here in Kenya. Remember, after the 1963 independence, we have the two. At that time, there was a bipolar world. There was the USSR and there was the USA. And we had Jaramogi Oginga Odinga on one side. We had Pio Gama Pinto on the other side. And then we had Tom Mboya on the other side and the representative of the United States establishment. But realizing that the Kenyan people were more sympathetic towards the support that the socialist camp had given to the African continent towards the liberation movement. And the policy to assassinate the African left leaders and even the Kenyan left leaders was rolled out by the CIA. And remember, even the prominent African leaders that we continue to mention, and all of them were also Pan-Africanist. Nobody says if those leaders were either socialist, but none of them were capitalist. From Mandela to all the way to Julius Nyerere, mention any prominent African leader with a clear legacy, you realize that the formulation of their mind were basically on the socialist trajectory. But what happened is that Pio Gama Pinto, in line, just like Malcolm X, remember, Malcolm X had just visited our country here and had very good collaboration with Pio Gama Pinto, and to talk about the commonalities between the struggle of the Black Africans in United States of America and the importance of the national liberation movement. And if you look at most of the Malcolm X speeches, you realize how he has even brought out the issues of Mau Mau as one of the successful armed struggles in the African continent. That led to the tragic death of Pio Gama Pinto. And that
3 days after Malcolm X.
Yeah, 3 days after Malcolm X.
Yes.
So they were murdered almost at the same. And this just shows how Pan-Africanism and socialism were intertwined during that period of African independence. And then the ideological offensive. Remember, after that, there was the CIA Sensational Paper Number 10.
Yes.
That was sponsored by Tom Mboya in Parliament against African revolutionaries. And later on, Tom Mboya wrote, with the help of the CIA, presented that paper called African Socialism, which was basically, the capitalism with some African trappings that was meant to bring confusion. So you realize that the African continent has been permanently been placed under confusion. And and that is why it was important for Walter Rodney to come up with a document, because even Walter Rodney was also assassinated, was murdered, and he was one of the key African leaders from Black African leaders, for that matter, that participated and was very useful in terms of even articulating some of Nyerere's policies within Tanzania. So if you look at the fight for Pan-Africanism, because you realize that Pan-Africanism can be explained in 3 important tasks. There are people who actually see Pan-Africanism as a movement of the oppressed Black African people. This is important. There are people who also see Pan-Africanism as an ideology to connect the oppressed African race. And there is us who see, Pan-Africanism as a permanent desire for African people, whether they are in Africa or wherever they found themselves, even against their will, to fight for their total unity and also the total liberation of the continent, to give them dignity. But do we want to unite Africa in the way Europe was united? Because you see, Europe was a continent of plunder. It was a continent that was laid down based on the robbery of other, mainly what they call the backward continents. Mm-hmm. But in the African people, we do not have the desire to rob any other person. So how do we unite the African continent away from the European style of unity? So we see that objectivity of total unity, among the African people and the African continent, to bring not just sovereignty, but the dignity of the most oppressed race, is only possible under scientific socialism. That is how we formulate that struggle in our party. And that is why the Communist Party Marxist Kenya is also a Pan-Africanist organization, because we see that For example, you see a lot of similarities. There are countries in Asia that got independence just about the same time we did. And when you talk about independence, we talk about formal political independence, because the economic independence was never granted. The colonial structures were left as they were. Only a few people were actually appointed to manage those colonial structures. But if you see countries like China that departed, Laos that departed, Vietnam that departed from the colonial structures that were left by the most brutal colonial power at that time, which was Japanese, you realize that they had taken a leap in terms of development. So we will say that in application of socialism in the African continent, the most immediate task at the moment is that the African must defeat all foreign interest here. And these puppets, like, William Samoei Ruto and the rest, they only, receive money from the West to manage, they are like board of directors that manages Kenya as a company on behalf of some shareholders, which are mainly imperial foreign interests in Washington. And that is why you see William Samoei Ruto cannot make decisions on his own.
You can't.
Because once you pick the blood money from the Western, fascist, what they will do is to continue pushing you. Remember, even knowing about the finance bill, President William Samoei Ruto knew that it was the most unpopular bill that ever. But he was a man captured.
Yeah.
Now he has placed us in a non-NATO ally. He is opening our airspace to very dangerous, war maneuvers. Because remember, just the mere fact that we are hosting United States military bases put us in the crossfire. Anytime, even to say, we will not be surprised if the Iranian missile hits the Kenyan coast.
We're not far away from them.
Yes, because as long as you continue to support, a global aggressor and enabling to oppress the African people, then you become in the line of fire. So this is how we see. But also there is fundamentally Pan-Africanism that was, there were some philosophical thinkers like Senghor, for example. Senghor came with the negritude, as an African philosophy. And it was the desire for the African people, to go back to their roots, to go back to their ideas, to go back to the way they eat, which was a good, formulation. But the thing is that you cannot unroll the wheels of history, because remember the Kenyan population today has gone fundamental change since the imperialist offensive. So if we are still want to, for example, engage in the African farming, the truth of the matter is that there is no land to engage in that farming. The land was already taken by the Britain. The land is taken by the conservancies. The land is taken by the comprado ruling class in this country. And the most people that you see, even in the urban areas, those who want to engage in farming, they will try to put some, a bucket on your balcony. But that will not bring food sovereignty. Food sovereignty is to liberate the land, to make the land for the farming for the people. So there are certain. So what we must continue to understand is that Africa is a theater for struggle, and the interest of foreign people is to divide the African continent and bring confusion. This is important. For example, now there is the young parliamentarians that have been sponsored by the National Endowment, Economic Endowment Fund, which is actually American offensive in the African continent to promote, Hutu as a political ideology. But Hutu itself says, I am because we are. This is a very
Ubuntu.
socialist approach to things. But in terms of its reinterpretation in the current, it cannot be that I am because we are, while others are property. Others don't have property. Others can access education, others cannot access. So the truths around I am because we are, in terms of Ubuntu, was conceived by the African thinkers within that advanced communalism. But the society has continued to advance. The plunder of the African continent have denied the African people, the wealth that they can say that I am because we are. Because at that time I say I am because we are, because the children are for the community. The food is the community. The land is for the community. But now land has been appropriated. The food has been instrumentalized and weaponized. So such conceptions of African ideas only found meaning when there was equality in the what the West called the primitive African setup and what we call the advanced communalism setup. But at the moment, the enemies must be defeated first. Then we can say I am because we are. Because now that brings out the aspect of solidarity, the aspect of true love for the African people. But as you continue to say, in fact, it's like regurgitating the religion, instrumental. Like, for example, if you ask somebody in the context in Africa, are we equal? Then you'll realize that they can only tell you that we are equal in the eyes of God. We were made in the eyes of God. So this religion that brings equality, this religion of Ubuntu that brings, because they're saying Marxism is foreign. African people must find their own ideology. But this finding their own ideology is to try to just bring a lot of confusions within the African continent. But the people who have bring dignity to the African people were indeed people that were aligned to socialism. And even the murder of human rights activists like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, their formulation of ideas and their death were at the breach in which now they were trying to question the fundamental, usefulness of the United States hegemony, which was imperialism at that time.
So, I like that. Now, does the Communist Party Marxist of Kenya align with any other non-black community that subscribes to socialism? For example, China and other communities outside of Africa.
You see, as a communist, we rely on scientific culture and mass culture. And that means, for us, we see lack of melanin in our skin or melanin in our skin does not contribute to how we are oppressed. In fact, the black people only share a history of oppression, not because they are black, but because of certain fundamental, historical events that took place in the development of the black race. For example, we are the only race that was enslaved. So that means in terms of collective suffering of oppression, we can talk about the black race as the most oppressed. Not because they are black, but because their common environment is that they were actually enslaved, and their labor was used to build cities that they never got to enjoy. The black labor, people that were captured in the African continent went to build North America, and then only to be treated like, animals and not as human beings. So this is a phenomenon. In terms of colonialism, the majority of the black people or the brown people were actually colonized. So it's not that they suffered oppression because of their blackness or their brownness, but because of the ruthless exploitation that took place during the colonialism. So we believe that the people who produce wealth in whatever melanin, in whatever skin they are, must have a right to actually decide or, the usefulness of that wealth. So, yes, so the Communist Party Marxist is also guided by clear principles of proletariat, internationalism, and solidarity. That means that we are in solidarity with all the oppressed people of the world. And we try to identify the biggest enemy of the world. So, the Communist Party also have, for example, Kenya, Cuba, Friendship Society, to try and understand the ways and the many ways, because even if we talk about Cuba, Cuba's contributed a lot in terms of the national liberation of the African continent. It is through the Cuban internationalists that the back of apartheid was broken. In fact, if you can check into history, it's called the Victory of Quito Carnaval, where the Cuban combatants, internationalists under the direction of Fidel Castro, joined the Angolan nationalists to actually try to fight the apartheid advance towards Luanda in Angola. Anyway, that victory came when the apartheid army suffered several defeats. And if you look at the reflections of the father of independence of Angola, that is Agostinho Neto, he could tell you how warm the Angolan people are, receive the Cuban, combatants there. And also the way the Cuban played a role in Mozambique and in support of the South African national liberation movement. In fact, more than 10,000 Cubans died on the African soil during the national liberation and the fight against, liberation. And that brings, if you look at even Fidel Castro, when he was choosing the fighters, he chose them carefully, what we're calling the Pan-African force, that it was not just the Cubans that came to fight in the African continent, but also the African people in diaspora were mobilized to come and liberate the African continent under the able leadership of Commander Fidel Castro. So in that case, we see that the Communist Party Marxist of Kenya and the African continent owes Cuba that solidarity. Because remember, everybody that has come to the continent has left with gold and diamond. But what did the Cuban internationalists leave with? Only the dead bodies of the people that were fighting against apartheid. So in that case, we support and seek to relate with anybody in the world that are fighting against the primary aggressor, which is the United States imperialism, to defend their sovereignty. Mm-hmm. So we support Iran, for example. Mm-hmm. We support China against encirclement. We support Russia against United States encirclement. We support Eritrea here, our neighbors. We remember Eritrea is one of the unique countries that has been able to put IMF and World Bank out, but they're continuously being attacked under sanctions and commercial blockades. We support the countries of the Sahel region in their fight for independence. And we see a lot of similarities. In fact, even the last colony in the African continent is Western Sahara. So we support the total liberation of the Sahrawi people against Morocco occupation. And, so when we say Africa is for Africans, first of all, it is a rally call to say that there is no business why foreign interest should be domiciled here in Africa. Then the second thing is that when you say the Africans are for Africans, is now the Africans should get an opportunity to sort out their own problems. In essence, if there is an African oppressor, if there is an African land grabber, if there is an African thief, then the African people have the same moral to deal with them. We don't need an external, force. And that is why we even take very clear, for example, ICC, as we don't support International Criminal Court. We see it as an imperialist court to. But also remember
every single person that has been convicted by the ICC is an African.
Sure. And also, when you are fighting a ruthless and a most powerful entity like United States, if you don't fight them carefully without forming clear partnership, then you will end up only through death. This is what history has proven. Remember, let me give one example in the African continent. For example, Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi was one of the greatest Pan-Africanists of our time, and he gave his people dignity. He challenged the United States hegemony in Libya, and he made sure that Tripoli was a home of dignity. But independence also means military force. That means the Libyan government never thought that at one time the United States and their subcontractors in Paris will one day bomb them and destroy the African state. The Libyan state was destroyed. Gaddafi was murdered. And the Pan-Africanist project that was being built there essentially, I will say, became a halt. There is no Pan-Africanism now. Gaddafi is dead. The Libyan state is destroyed. In fact, the Arabs have now even have gone to the next level of even trading Africans for slaves. Yes. So why we must support certain regional powers and certain global powers in the world, this is important because of the very survival of our state. Remember, if the Sahel region, if now we support, let us say, the Sahel, the Ouagadougou government.
Ibrahim
Traore. But remember, Ibrahim Traore, without the Russians' military hardware, they will have been bombed to death. Eritrea, without the Chinese equipment, they will have been bombed to a ghost city. Even today, if the Communist Party Marxist takes government here, and even let us say we've not even taken this country to a socialist path, but we just want to say that let all foreign interests leave our country and let Kenyans remain for Kenyan people. The first thing is that there will be an external attack. The United States have their military bases here. They will have their boots on the ground to overthrow us even before we start running our project. So what we are saying is that our association with other military powerful organizations is also based on our very survival. For example, remember Cuba during the nuclear crisis? Without the USSR, they would have been finished. Even us, we have to form tactical alliances for our very survival. We just wish that what if Tripoli, during Gaddafi, had formed some tactical alliance with Russia or China? We will have still the Libyan state standing. Today, if you look at Traore, one of the biggest critics that the Western media always say that the Russian mercenaries are there. But without the Russians' anti-rocket launchers there, the Paris will bomb Traore. They will overthrow that government and make it, just like Tripoli. So that is why we are saying that we consider that when we are using, we need, in fact, for us, we are always reaching out to China. We are always reaching out to Iran. We are reaching out to Russia and all other stakeholders that are challenging United States hegemony. Because we know that for our project to survive in Kenya, we will need support from other powers that can match the air power, can match the lethal and the ruthlessness of the United States.
So this is where I disagree with you, Booker. I'm a Pan-African nationalist. I'm a revolutionary Pan-African nationalist. So that means I'm a Gaviite. And us Gaviites, we believe that the global African race should unite economically, politically, and socially. And then once we do that, we become self-determined, self-sufficient, and self-ruling. So what does that mean? It means that we don't accept any help or any interference or any assistance from the white race, from the Asian race, from the Arabian race, from the Latino race, from any race that is not African. Why are we saying this? Because we can do this on our own. We are the richest continent in the world. We have all the minerals. to build our weaponry, to build our economy. Africa has everything at its disposal to defend itself and to provide for itself. There is no reason why we should align with people like, for example, China, who are one of the people who are contributing to the crisis and to the mess that's going on in the DRC. Just yesterday, Booker, I was speaking to my friend, he's called Mark, and I'm going to have Mark on the show. He's a Zambian, but he works as a truck driver in the DRC, transporting these minerals from the mines to wherever they are going to, yeah? He tells me all the time, Orina, don't be fooled by the media. China is also a part of this. The West is a part of it alongside China. They are also a part of stealing the minerals from wherever in Congo, the cobalt, the lithium, the coltan. They are working in conjunction with the Israelis, with Glencore, with the Europeans, with Americans. They're paying the 7, 8-year-old, 9-year-old children pennies to $1, and also the adults pennies to $1. There's unsafe working environments in those mines. They're collapsing. People are dying. The Chinese are operating those mines as well. The West is doing that, but the Chinese are also doing that as well. So what am I saying? I subscribe to what Kwame Nkrumah said. Kwame Nkrumah said that we're not looking east, we're not looking west, we are looking forward. But my remix to that quote, Booker, is that before we look forward, let's look inward first and ask ourselves as Africans, how do we call ourselves free, sovereign Africans, yet we haven't even started the process of decolonization? Our founding fathers came into office, most of them, and just inherited the white man's economic, social, and political systems. Why don't we decolonize? The reason why we are going through the same problems, unemployment, bad economy, bad education, and all these things is because we skipped step 1 in 1963, for example, in Kenya. We could have started by decolonizing Africa, like African countries. Then we start step 2, which is building our own African social, economic, political systems that is run by the Africans, operated by the Africans, created by Africans. But the problem is that we haven't even started the process of decolonization. So what we Pan-African nationalists believe in is that we don't align with anyone that is not black. Let us unite. Let us create our own path. And then once we do that, we can now say that, okay, now that we own our minerals, now that we own our farms, now that we have advanced our security to a point where we don't need Russia to help us secure our borders. Now that we have done all those things, we can form partnerships with China. Not from a raw materials perspective, but from a finished product perspective. Not what they're doing in Congo alongside Israelis and the Western powers. We have our finished product here. We have taken our cobalt, lithium, and whatevers. We have made them into phones like these, lights like these, laptops like these, and power banks like this. So now we sell them to America. We'll sell them to Europe. We sell them to China. That's the partnership that we Pan-African nationalists subscribe to. Not a partnership where you guys come and do the same things that white people are doing. So we don't look east. We don't look west. We don't look forward first. Before we look forward, let's look inward. Let's clean Africa. Let's detox Africa by decolonizing it. So once we decolonize, and once we have taken back our continent, let's run it 100%. Because Booker, I'm telling you, even though the East is looking, and I said this in a channel called Alpha House. I was in a panel, and people were pro-East. And I was telling, and even the Russian embassy was there actually, when I was speaking. And I told them in front of the Russian embassy, guys, even though Russia, China, whoever the East,
Sorry.
even though the East is looking, friendly, even if they are not approaching Africa in a very aggressive and in a very arrogant way, the way the West have been doing, it doesn't mean that their end goal is different. Their end goal is the same. Their end goal is everybody wants Africa to themselves. Everybody wants Africa to themselves. Their approach might be different from the West. I agree. They don't, they don't meddle with our culture. They don't, they don't meddle with our social systems the way the West do. But the goal is simple. Everybody wants Africa to themselves. They have interests in Africa, and they want to do the same thing the West are doing, which is controlling Africa and exploiting Africa to their own benefit and to enrich their own power. So I'm finishing. So basically, Booker, that's basically what we're saying. That's where we disagree. That's where we Pan-African nationalists disagree with Black socialists. I don't disagree with socialism as an ideology. I don't have a problem with it. Capitalism should go, because there's no way we can say that capitalism will free Africans. Capitalism, in it of itself, was made by the colonizer, and it was made to keep certain people on top and certain people at the bottom. Capitalism should go. It will never free Africa. But at the same time, I'm saying that I don't agree with socialism. I disagree with Black socialists who align with people who are non-Black, who have a history and who are currently contributing to our oppression. That is what I'm saying, Brother Book. Yeah.
So you mentioned quite a bit of things that
yes,
I think we can confront in this
discussion. No problem.
First of all, it is good for us to learn from history.
Mm-hmm.
It is not the wishes of men or the wishes of the oppressed people that lead to revolutionary change. Because what you have described is the best alternative. But for us who are revolutionaries, we are not just to give analysis of how the world ought to be. Because in essence, if we're talking about how the world ought to be, then we do not need any oppression in the world. But how to arrive to that world, that is the fundamental. So in Black nationalism, you put the primary contradiction as the race. This is our departure, because why is the Black race oppressed? This fundamentally has to be answered, because the Black race is not oppressed because they are Black. The Black race is oppressed because they have been denied the source of dignity, which is their economic labor, their collective economic labor, their natural resources. This is why they are poor. That is why they are poor, because they are being robbed. Now, who is robbing them? Is the organized criminals outside the African continent, mainly in London, in Paris, and in Washington. Now, if you look at the people who actually are robbing the African continent, how can they be defeated? History has a lot of lessons for us that even during the fight for independence, why we did not complete the fight for independence is because the oppressed people in Britain supported their government and the oppression of the African continent. But now that the British government is not looting as much from the African continent, particularly the Kenyan people, through direct colonialism, we can see a lot of solidarity from the British working class. Mm-hmm. This is the consciousness that we must continue to bring through. Now, when you talk about hierarchy, you see, at any given time, you must identify the enemy, the primary enemy. You can have other enemies, But there's one enemy that when defeated, the struggle is elevated. For example, this brings me to the question of China, because it is a question that has been discussed. The only thing for us is that we can criticize China. We don't see China as beyond critic. Only that we cannot criticize China in the racist way and in the bigotry way that the West wants us to criticize China. Because this campaign that China is recolonizing African continent is sponsored by the same Western NGOs that actually managed to anchor United States imperialism in our land here. So we can criticize China. We can criticize the excesses of China in the African continent, but we must criticize them knowing that the stage of the global development we are today, China may be an enemy, but not the primary enemy. This is important for us. Why are we saying that? Any African liberation movement, let us even talk about, now we are talking about you remember, through the prospect of black nationalism that was invoked by President William Samoei Ruto to send our police to Haiti, for example, because the Haitians people are black people. So the black Kenyan police was meant to be in solidarity with the Haitian people. But what happened was that when the police arrived in the Port-au-Prince, in the capital city of the Haitians, what happened? They only defended the United States establishment in there.
Yeah.
This is important for us.
Yes.
But any experiment that will be taken to liberate the black race without considering the military, because you can say we have everything. If we have everything, why was Gaddafi defeated? If we have everything in the African continent, because there is also what we call the immortal theory of uneven development, that even at the level of family level, Orina's family, you can see the uneven development in the family based on your experiences, the opportunities, and the level of the development of the productive forces at that time. Because for us who are Marxists, we still hold that fundamental truth that the level of development of the productive forces depict the consciousness of the human being and not otherwise. In essence, what we are saying is that we must not fight a fight of Puritan or isolating ourselves, because the victory will indeed be postponed. We must be able to, in our analysis, to form tactical alliances without selling our country, to be able to defend the Kenya National Project and the African National Project. And this I continue to say because we have seen, very elaborate ways that the African National Project has benefited directly from the internationalism of the other nations. So the primary contradictions in the world is not the question of race. It is the question of who holds and wields the economic power. Because if it is a question of race, then why are we fighting in, for example, Sudan? Why are we fighting in Ivory Coast? Why are we fighting in let us say, Somalia? These are black people. Why are they killing each other?
Well, Sudan is different because the RSF is being powered by the UAE, which is being powered by the US.
But at the center of it is race, and our unity is anchored on the African race, why is it that part of the African race will accept themselves to be bought to oppress the African race?
Yeah.
While again, for you and me, in the black nationalism, we defend African race as a blanket. Because we don't see that within the African race, even I think it was Martin Luther King or Malcolm X that talk about the house Negroes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so when you talk about the theory of the house Negroes, we must also recognize that Africa as a race has been differentiated in different classes. And we have the privileged, corrupt African people that worked against the African national project.
I agree.
So that brings the immortal truth that the primary contradiction cannot be the skin that we share, but can be. I do not share the same struggles as William Samoei Ruto. My children here do not share the same struggles, like, the rural children. For example, even if we're talking about the women questions or the children questions, you remember that the rich African, for example, even if you look at the United States of America, look at the celebrities, the African celebrities, we will realize that the African celebrities in the United States, why are they working against the African emancipation in the United States? They don't consider themselves as black people. Only the majority of them, in fact, a few now call black for the Trump administration. How do you call that? So the unity cannot only be based on the language we speak, the color of the skin we share. In fact, fundamentally, what we are saying is that the primary contradiction that communism desires to address, which had some similarities with the advanced communalism in the African context, is how the national and the global cake is being shared. Whoever gets the biggest share in terms of financial, in terms of economic power, has the privilege to oppress the other people, whether they are Africans or non-Africans. So the primary contradiction was at that time during the colonial entity that most black population were oppressed and enslaved. At the very end of it, now we even have how in your own theory of black nationalism do we deal with the black oppressor that we see? Because who is killing us in the streets in Nairobi here? They're black people. Who is stealing money meant for medicine? Even the land, if you look at the Ndungu land report and the TGRC report, they are not, we have the three political families owning big portions of land against the African people here in Kenya. We have the Moi family, we have the Jomo Kenyatta family, we have Raila Molo's family, we have the Anglican Church, we have the Catholic Church as the main dispossessors of land from the African people. So your logic of African for Africans can survive when we are dealing with the direct occupiers. For example, we have imposition of the British, establishment in our country. Then we can mobilize Kenyans for self-rule to make sure that we remove the occupiers out of here. But after that, how do we deal with the house Negroes? This cannot be addressed within the limits of the black nationalism.
No, it can't, because at the end of the day, as Pan-African, part of Pan-African nationalism, Booker, is not only driving the oppressors out and us running our economic, political, and social system on our own. It's also cleaning it. When I say decolonize, I don't mean decolonizing from European white supremacist systems only. I also mean that we decolonize. Like, decolonizing also means removing these leaders we have right now because they have a colonial mindset. They first of all, our leaders like Ruto, I think we can all agree that Ruto was installed by the West to do their bidding, correct?
Of course.
So many of our leaders don't have a single inkling of love, a single
Orina,
inkling.
it's not just our leaders. Look at our education system. It was anchored by the colonial masters.
Yes.
So when we talk about Communist Party Marxist fighting for the true consciousness of the people, because the education system is deluded. It's mainly to brainwash the African people, to hate their continent, to hate their country. So the attack on the African continent, that, like, for example, why do we appreciate having these discussions here? Because these discussions will not be had in the mainstream media. It is fairly controlled by the editorial policies. It is captured by Western propaganda. It is a brainwashing advancement for the minority who wants to rule the majority. But at the center of it, whether you access dignity or not in the global capitalist system, There are governments that have actually, structurally weaponized racism, for example. That is why in the United States, racism is quite severe, because racism has been weaponized, and there are even white privileges within that system.
Yeah.
But when we are fighting white privileges, we cannot fight white privileges with black privileges. But you can also you cannot defeat a powerful enemy without forming an alliances, because a powerful enemy is indeed to be defeated through the collective resistance of the people and the most available resources that can be centered in anywhere in the world. When we talked about the Mau Mau as a national liberation front, if they had said that this is an African phenomenon that needs to be dealt with through the fundamentally African nationalism, then they should not have used even the gunpowder, because gunpowder is not akin to the black race. It was generally the development of gun took place outside there. So what we're trying to say that.
Like whatever, for example, the Mau Mau, whatever weapon, you do whatever it takes to take back your freedom. Whether you're using swords or spears or guns, you do whatever it takes, even if it's stealing the white man's gun to kill the white man so that we take our freedom. You do whatever it takes to ensure that we are free. But my thing is...
But that is contradictory to your earlier point, because you're saying that African race has everything. So what about things that we don't have and exist in other? Because the theory of
well, at the moment, Booker, at the moment, we didn't have, at the moment, we were not organized enough to make our own weapons so that we can defeat the white man. Well, I mean, we had our crude weapons, right? But we could only get guns from stealing from the white man so that we can go kill them and try to get our freedom, right? But now that we have some sort of autonomy to a point whereby we can make our own weapons, I don't know about you. I subscribe to a point whereby we need to have our own nuclear weapons so that we can.
Let us say tomorrow in the Black Nationalist starts in Kenya a nuclear program, whether it is a nuclear program, a peaceful nuclear program, or a nuclear program as a deterrence against Western offensive, or even try to manufacture certain superior weapons like intercontinental ballistic missiles that the Iranians are doing. The thing is that the United States will bomb us. This is the thing. So who will protect us from the bombs that are being rained upon us by the United States? If we say we only need African technology.
You mean to tell me that, Brother Booker, we cannot unite our African armies to make our own African navy, our own African nuclear force, our own African marine, our own African military system that can be more powerful than Russia and America being put together?
That is wishful thinking that we can unite just as African people. We have never united just as African people. There is always the enemy within the African people fighting the African people.
We need to
even in the African Union.
Yeah.
Does it protect the sovereignty of the African people?
That one is funded by the West.
So what we are saying is that the fundamental is that the unity does not come just because you share skin or a race.
It's
fundamental unity in fact, the united people share. In fact, this I refer to some of the classics of Stalin, because we read a lot of Stalin, that what encompasses the unity of a people in terms of a nationhood, what entails a nationhood. You must share the national economy. You must probably have a language. You must probably have, an African, for example, the means to exchange in the economy in terms of your own monies. But at the very end of it, you can never, imagine unity just based on your race color or the color of your skin. Everything is determined on how you access economic dignity. Otherwise, we will not have, even in the most poor neighborhoods in this country, why are still there extremely heinous crimes in the informal neighborhoods, which are mainly African population, even in the ghettos in the United States? Why is it that the African people are killing themselves? Essentially, the contradiction is not that the African people hate themselves. The thing is that the African people are struggling economically.
But Africans do hate themselves. We have and I said this in my previous video. The African mind is the African software. The African software hasn't been updated. The African software has been corrupted by white supremacy to a point whereby the African isn't proud of himself. He or she doesn't put himself first. He puts other people first. He puts white people first. He puts Asian people first. He puts Russian people first.
First of all, Africa, just because you are African does not make you a special person in the globe. Well, just because you're white, it does not make you a special person in the globe.
Well, for white, no. But for Africans, it is. You know why, Brother Booker? Just a bit. You know why, Brother Booker? Is because, number one, we are the race that started humanity. Every race came from the black race.
You know,
every race came from black race. We are special. African people are the most special people in the world because we started humanity.
You know,
something happened to us to a point where, how did we move from, just a bit, brother, I'll let you speak. I'll let you speak. Let me finish my point. How did we move from starting humanity, building the greatest civilizations in Kemet, which is the current day Egypt, in Mali, in Songhai, even here in Eastern Africa, in the Nubia. How did we move from that? We civilized white people, by the way. We taught them how to bathe. We taught them how to eat. We educated them. How did we move from brother, how did we move from all those great things to where we are right now?
You know,
that is what Pan-Africanism addresses.
You remind me of a philosophical debate, you know. Mm-hmm. You know why the origin of African philosophy basically was Africans proving themselves that they have contributed to the civilization of the world because of the racist thinkers of Europe. So even if you look at the things like the Nile civilization, the origin of mathematics from Egypt and all that kind of authors. In fact, some people have even gone fairly in detail to understand how the Greek philosophers, the Socrates, the Plato, the Aristotle, how they went to African continent to appropriate knowledge and then theorize them in the best way they can. But this particular, and you know, this also affected the uptake of Marxism in the African continent. Because even you remember, now you're mentioning Kwame Nkrumah and Nyerere. These people went to study abroad. Mm-hmm. And when they went to study abroad, in the intellectual circles in Europe, there was a lot of racist attacks against the African continent. In fact, even one of the prominent European philosophers like Hegel actually went further to mention that the African race was innocent of thought and still living in nature, just like animals. So there was the need for a response from the African thinkers to prove themselves to the conventional European thinkers that indeed the Africans were thinking before the arrival of the white man. And some of the research that I think the best person that did it in Kenya was the late Dr. Odera Oruko, who did the philosophy of sagacity, to try and look at the wise people in the villages that had not interacted with the white man, and if they were able to theorize or even think in a philosophical way. So you realize that the development of African philosophy did not develop out of a vacuum. It was Africa trying to defend themselves. But just because, for example, you did something first does not make you the immortal superior of all beings. This is important because even in terms of the imperialist march, remember at one moment in history, Europe, particularly London, was the workshop of the world. Mm-hmm. How did they lose that power? They cannot hold on to it that everything was manufactured in England. So they were the brainchild behind the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. They lost that power and it went to the United States. Now United States has lost the power of manufacturing to China. So in essence, there could be certain technologies or certain civilizations that has their origin in the African continent. But that does not prove superiority of any race.
I didn't say superiority. I don't believe in supremacy or superiority of any race. All Pan-African nationalists believe in is that, white people, just go back to where you guys came from. Let's create our own path as Africans only. And let's run our Africa for 100%. Without white people, without Asians. But that is what Pan-African nationalists
race is not at the center of our liberation. In fact, the oppressed people, white or black. In fact, if you go down even to South Africa here, do we have white beggars?
Do we have white beggars?
Yes.
Well, I'm sure there are. But there are few majority of white people in South Africa are in a very privileged position.
Today, we have the white workers in New York that are fighting Trump administration for having taken jobs out of. Are they not our brothers and sisters?
No, they're not. They're not. We cannot. Let me tell you something, Brother Booker. The reason why I'm saying,
why are they not our brothers and sisters? They're battling the same regime. They're fighting.
They're not a part of the African race.
But they're fighting the same oppression.
White people cannot be a part of the African race because
we're not saying they're part of African race. We are saying that
just because they are fighting Trump doesn't mean
they're actually fighting the same imperialism. Does it mean imperialism only affects the black people?
Well, because at the end of the day, whether you're fighting Trump or Biden, at the end of the day, it's the same American machine.
Yes, but I'm asking, are there brown people, are there white people that are being, suffocated by imperialism?
Well, I'm sure there are.
Yes.
But not suffocated. Let me tell you something. Now, in America, I agree. There's poor white people. Fine. There's poor white people. But at the end of the day, if there's one thing that's a constant between whether you're rich or whether you're poor as a white person, is that you enjoy one thing that black people don't enjoy in America. And that is white privilege.
But there are black people in America that are much more privileged than the white people.
White supremacy.
Okay, let us talk about Gen Z. Is he white?
Sorry?
Let's talk about let's talk about the musicians in the United States. Are they whites? Majority of them. Celine Dion was he a white person?
Celine Dion.
Yeah.
Celine Dion is white.
Brown, I think.
I don't know if Celine Dion is, but I think she's white. She's a Canadian.
But what about 50 Cent?
Well, 50 is black.
Yeah.
No. Just because, and by the way, I disagree with a lot of black celebrities. You know why? Because even though you've reached a certain economics and social status, most of them do not give back to the community, and most of them do not use their voice to fight for black people.
We should be fighting for those blacks, is it? Even Ruto is black here.
Yeah, he's black. But
so should we put our lives?
You're misunderstanding my point. I don't mean that just because you're black, we unite regardless of your character and regardless of what you believe in.
But
let me be very clear.
Your center argument is that the black people cannot unite with other races to fight oppression.
We cannot.
But who is the primary oppressor of the world?
It's white supremacy.
For us, we don't see that.
It's white supremacy. And that's what we see. We see that white supremacy in form of Council of Foreign Relations, the Roman Catholic Church, the Trilateral Commission, the IMF, the World Bank, the UN, the Bilderberg Group, the many other branches of white supremacy that I haven't mentioned. They're using those institutions to, number one, maintain white power and white rule in the world, economically, politically, and socially. Number two, to ensure white genetic survival. Number three, to ensure that any other race falls below them. That is the main agenda of white supremacy institutions. Why do you think the IMF is here? Giving the social adjustment programs, confusing the African economy, confusing... Just a bit.
IMF and World Bank, since you've asked me, IMF and World Bank are weapons in the hands of the United States empire. They are weapons of the minority class, the dominance class in the United States. In fact, IMF and World Bank its primary objective is to subordinate the economies of the periphery to the economies of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
This is the logic behind the formation of the Bretton Woods institutions. But when you are subordinating an economy to your economy, but in whose interest? Is for monopoly capital, is to expand profits. Why the United States multinationals are coming here through EPZ? It's not because they're white. No, it's basically because they want to exploit almost the free African labor that is expensive in their countries. And now they have found some puppets, or what we call the comprados, or what you call the house Negroes here, that continues to auction our countries to this monopoly capital. But we cannot say that, in fact, capital has no race. It is just capital, whether it is, if I have money now as Booker, I could use my money to oppress my people, to enslave my people. Mm-hmm. But does that money have color? I don't think so. It doesn't.
Well, what's your definition of racism?
You see, first of all, racism comes from unsound historical logic that just because you share lack of melanin or melanin can exalt you to be a superior human being than the others. In fact, black nationalism is nothing further from white supremacy, because the white thinks they're privileged because just they lack melanin in their skin. What is the difference between that logic and you who also think that just because you have melanin in your skin, you're more privileged? In fact, it would have been better to reinterpret it. Why is it that the majority of the oppressed people are black people? Why? It is not because of the color of their skin, but it's because of the historical lived experiences and social subjugation and economic subjugation, political subjugation that they have been placed under for several years. So they actually share a historical path. This is what makes them familiar. But even within the colored communities, we still have the oppressors. These oppressors cannot be rendered more superior just because of the color.
No, I didn't say that. And again, I repeat, decolonizing our African society means that we eradicate every single black oppressor as well. That is part of decolonization. And I think I've made that clear. For us, the real meaning of racism is systemic. It is a race controlling the power and destiny of another race.
There are two types of racism.
So for example,
that is only one type of racism. There are two types of racism. For example, there's Chinese racism.
Mm-hmm.
There is United States racism. Why do you say that they are not the same? When I go to Beijing, I could get an individual,
mm-hmm.
a Chinese racist person. But I can be sure that the CPC, the government of China, will not tolerate that racism. And in fact, more often, Chinese racism is punished. This is the truth. However, there is also Chinese racism on Chinese social media. For example, there are several people in Chinese communities that are attacking the African race on social media while the government is tolerating them.
Mm-hmm.
This tolerance is not, they do not appropriate any privileges as racist people in China. But this is different when we talk about the United States. Because United States racism is part of the system.
Mm-hmm.
It creates white privileges, it creates brown privileges, it creates black underprivileges, just like the Calabar system during the colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
So there are two clear types of racism, even in terms of tribalism, just or xenophobia, or any other social phenomena that is used to divide a people, is that when during dictator Moi in our country, the Kalenjin nationalism was wired right at the center of our system. So we are not just fighting Calais hating other tribes, but we are seeing a system that rewards and punishes. That is what we are seeing under Moi regime. But if it comes of just like the hate for some, if you don't have political power, then racism is superflowers. If you don't have political powers, then any other discrimination is superflowers for us. And that is why I do not mind in Beijing in a train and some Chinese backward person thinking is more superior than the African race. Because I know for that Chinese person who is backward, his government has a responsibility to educate him to increase his level of consciousness. But I know that the Chinese government will not tolerate an attack of a black person in the train because they are black. While in the United States, in New York, a white person will attack you right in the train, will he face justice?
How many Chinese activists who are not racist, how many of them raised their voices when those Chinese videographers went to Malawi, to the villages in Malawi, and they were using those children, making them say offensive, racist, degrading Chinese words because those kids didn't understand Mandarin, but they were using those children, photographing them and recording them saying racist Chinese things so that they can go take those videos and sell them to Weibo or the Chinese social media platforms.
Yes, I could say that
basically,
even now the Chinese social media platforms, that is one of our main critics to the CPC, by the way. Because even though the Chinese social media platforms are being regulated by the Communist Party of China, which they are more intolerant in terms of any other opinion that challenges the Chinese leaders, they should also be even much strict in terms of ensuring that they do not have, racist sentiments against, any other race.
Those videos are selling like hotcakes. Yes. And number two, also...
but Booker. In terms of clear policy, in terms of China, and the clear policy in terms of the United States, one is racism is wired within the system. The others do not reward, in fact, it discourages. These two types of racism, for me, it is important for us to differentiate them. They're not the same.
We can agree to disagree. I know you have your ideology, I have my ideology. My ideology is very, very simple and is very, very based on reality. And it's very, very realistic in a way that we cannot, and it is a very, very, very big mistake for us to align with any non-black communities to contribute to African freedom. Because when you say...
Today we are celebrating...
just a bit, Booker. I really want to land my point so that you really understand where I'm coming from. You're talking about China. China, like we said, China is in Congo, exploiting them the same way Israelis and the same way Europeans, the same way Americans are doing. They're working together to ruin Congo.
It is not at the same level. There is hierarchy in terms of contradiction. In Kenya, Ruto is exploiting us. The Asian industrial area is exploiting us. The person who owns cows in the village and has employed people to take care of the cows is exploiting us. So there's a hierarchy of exploitation. What we are saying is that the biggest aggressor of the world is not Chinese.
It's not.
But the biggest aggressor is the United States. So when we are revolutionaries and want to advance the struggle of the most oppressed people, is to form alliances and defeat the primary. One time the Spanish Empire was the primary aggressor. The British Empire was the primary aggressor. Until we understand which is the main enemy, you cannot open an array of war on all fronts and expect to win. You are fighting Chinese, you are fighting Russia, you are fighting United States, you are fighting Iran. Where has African got dignity by fighting 1,000 wars at a time?
I'm not saying we fight the Chinese. I'm not saying we fight Russia. I'm not even saying that. I know the biggest oppressor of Africans is white supremacy in form of US and in form of Europe, in form of Western powers. I agree.
So but once you identify that, then we unite all other forces, even us, who are communist here. We cannot pretend that Kenya will be liberated by only communists. Communists are handfuls of people. They will just be crushed. Mm-hmm. This is the thing. So we must identify who in Kenya is oppressed by this system and who is in charge of that oppression. Then we unite all other sectors in Kenya. For example, the people we cannot unite with in Kenya are the big landlords. Mm-hmm. They have alienated people's land. These are the enemies of the Kenyan people. The agents of foreign interest, we cannot.
Of course.
Now, what we are saying is that if we say that the Communist Party want to liberate Kenya and we want only communists and we take that Puritan attitude, what about the anti-imperialist? What about the black nationalists like you who also want the African project to be returned to the African? So at this particular point, the correct policy is a united front against the United States imperialism. This united front is not just about communists. It even involves the patriots in Kenya. It involves the black nationalists. It involves the socialists. It involves the, even at other elements, you can even involve the black national bourgeoisies that are patriotic. Because at this end, our duty is to make sure that we reduce the powers of the United States as the primary aggressor. So the unity of the struggle, when we go to the streets, we don't ask ourselves, are these communists? They are social justice actors. They are, you trade unionists. What is the primary enemy that needs to be defeated?
I agree. Pan-African nationalists, we believe in the same thing. We believe that so long as you're black, regardless of your religion, of your class, of your ideology, whatever you believe in, so long as you're African, we can work together into creating self-determination.
What uniqueness do you see in blackness that I don't see?
Black is powerful. Black, let me tell you something.
If black is powerful, if black race is superior and the white people say it's superior.
No, I'm not saying
superior. Okay, it's powerful. How is black race powerful?
We created humanity. Before I even go to civilization, before I even go to us civilizing the whole world, before I even go to us inhabiting Europe, Asia, America first, I'm saying we started humanity.
So when they say that African is the cradle of mankind, now you think that Africa, just because they're Africans, they are powerful. If you are that powerful, how did the British come to colonize us?
No, exactly. Now that's the problem now. That's the problem. That's what decolonization is all about.
What about the African people who captured the black people to sell them as slaves? What about now the curated slavery that is taking place under the Ruto regime?
First of all, the white man came with guns and they came with superior weapons. No problem.
But we have slavery, everything according to you.
Well, at that time we didn't have the weapons that they had.
But I'm saying, according to you, we have everything.
No. But now we have. Which African country has nuclear weapons? No, we don't. That's why we need to develop it. We have all the yellow cake. We have all the uranium. Namibia has uranium. Niger is the biggest uranium supplier in Africa. That is what I'm saying.
Let us not just be nostalgia about the African race. What we are saying that
I'm not being nostalgic.
What gives people dignity in the current dispensation is how you access the global economy.
I'm not being nostalgic. I'm realizing the power in me as an African, and I want to harness that power to make sure that I'm independent.
There is black people that I cannot want to sit around. I do not want to share a table with them, but they are black. Why?
Well, you mean that you don't want to share a table with your...
Black people, yes.
Yeah.
They are black people I want to kill them.
Well, why? If I can ask.
For example, if I take political power, why should I spare William Samoei Ruto?
Oh, yeah, no problem.
He's black.
I agree
like
with
a charcoal.
I agree. The people who need to go because they're in our way to realizing true African freedom. And for me, Booker.
What about the African pedophiles, the colored ones?
They need to go. I'm not saying that we need to incorporate the good,
so it's contradictory to put race at the center, while for us,
I'm not saying
we find
Booker, and I think you keep cutting me off because you don't understand me. I just need you to understand me so that we can move forward from this. I'm saying, brother,
I don't agree with your preposition that the black race is powerful just because you're black.
No. Well, it is, but I'm saying that for us to realize African freedom, and we need to decolonize. Decolonizing, brother Booker, and I say it again, this is the third time I'm saying. I'm saying this. Decolonizing means that it doesn't just mean we decolonize from white systems, from Asian systems, and from other foreign systems. I'm saying decolonizing also means we eradicate every single African that is a sellout, every single African that is in our way to ensure that we get African freedom. That means we eradicate William Ruto and his cronies, all these politicians that are stealing money. That means we also eradicate every single black person, any black person that is.
What about conventional medicine? If you don't want other races, why are you taking anti-malaria tablets?
That's part of decolonization. That's part of decolonization. We can manufacture our own drugs as well. And also, not only modern drugs.
If you say we have everything, even the clothes you're putting on, where are they coming from?
Exactly. And now you're getting the point. That's what we need to ask ourselves. These are the questions we need to ask ourselves. These are the questions we need to ask ourselves. Why are we using stuff that that come from Europeans or everybody outside that we can make from our own?
There is nowhere that there's been progress in history through the unity of black people just because they're black. Even the Marcus Garvey's movement that started the Pan-Africanism because the Pan-Africanism is a movement that started out of the continent with the black people that were mainly oppressed outside the African continent.
Mm-hmm.
But the Pan-Africanism has continued to evolve over many years because Pan-Africanism was actually not an oppressor's idea. Pan-Africanism was a middle class idea. It was, in fact, in a more technical term, it was a petty bourgeois, thinking that just because the people can be united in terms of one race to defeat their own oppressor. But now look at the African Day that was founded by Kwame Nkrumah, that placed at the center of Pan-Africanism. He wrote one clear book, The Class Struggle of African Continent, to absolve himself through his backward theories of conscientism. So what we're saying is that any talk about the African race must be built on the superiority of scientific culture. In a sense, scientific culture is not akin to the race. There are science that have emerged from African continent. There are science that have emerged outside the African continent. Because of the theory of an uneven development, we should be able to appropriate those scientific development in other races and the scientific development in the African races to use them for the sake of defeating the primary enemy, which in essence, if you have in your own theoretical formulation, you have identified the appearance, because for us, white supremacy is just an appearance. It's like you are coughing. That is bad. But what makes you cough? You go to the root cause. But the people who have weaponized race, the people who continue to weaponize religion, the people who continue to weaponize tribe were mainly the minority that want to exploit the majority, which at that particular time, they were white minority. But at this particular point, we cannot say that the minority that continue to expropriate the African continent, in fact, their work will not have been easy if they did not have the so-called puppets in the African continent.
Who they installed. That's what I'm saying, Brother Booker. And by the way, let me respond to your point. When you say that we need to align with China, with Russia, and all these people to defeat
I'm saying aligning. I'm saying forming tactical alliance. Tactical alliance is where you have something that I don't have. We can unite to defeat our common enemy and then pick our difference from there.
I don't want that to happen. What I want to happen is, because I don't want it to happen. Nobody respects an African. Everybody hates us. Everybody hates us, Brother Booker. From white supremacists in Europe and America to Russia and China.
These things are not just moral issues.
No.
These are not sentimental issues.
No. Just let me finish. Nobody respects an African because nobody respects an African because nobody loves an African because nobody cares about an African. They don't have a problem fighting for Africa so that they can exploit it. And that's what's happening right now, if you ask me. That's what's happening right now. I believe the East and the West are fighting for Africa so that, not to help Africa, of course, but to exploit it. Whoever can grab the most from Africa wins. That's what this war is about.
Let's go to the fundamental roots of the African problem. The African...
For example, what is the number one problem?
African continent.
In Africa,
The African continent has a history of colonization.
Mm-hmm.
This is important. Colonization was just an appearance, because What was colonizing the African continent was what Lenin, in his own terms, called imperialism, where the monopoly capital leaves its origin to now divide the world to its own territories. That means the European monopoly capitalist divided Africa. Why were they dividing Africa? Not because Africa was occupied by the black race. Then they will not have done so to India. They have not done so to China, because China was also colonized like Africa. India was also colonized like the African people. But the reason was they wanted to multiply their capital. This is why they were moving to those places. So it is what you see as colonialism. We must say what caused colonialism was the people who could not multiply their wealth in Europe, in the rest of the world, through primitive accumulation, moved into the peripheral countries to multiply their wealth. This is important for us to recognize. Africa is not poor. Africa is being robbed every day. Mm-hmm. Who is robbing Africa? Not all white people are robbing African continent. There are some white people that don't have any interest in terms of robbing Africa people. They just found themselves in a privileged society where they were, if, for example, the NHS for the national health system of the British was funded from the colonies. That means that the white British workers were actually being bribed from the theft from the African continent. But now, if you look at London, Paris, the white workers are even having more radical and militant riots against their own governments because they cannot rob from the African continent. So what we are saying is that the reason that we must therefore seek for international solidarity is to also weaken the oppressed at home. For example, for us, the biggest solidarity for the white working class in the United States of America is to hold their government responsible. As they continue to fight Trump and the Trump administration and the Democrats and the Republicans there, it basically means that the white ruling class that's sitting in Washington indeed can therefore give us a breather to organize at home. Because if you talk about black nationalism, what the fuck was Barack Obama? Was he white?
Obama was a puppet.
So
he was a puppet, but at the end of the day,
what we are saying is that how come as we cannot recruit the white puppets, the other say?
It doesn't mean that just because you're black and in a position of power that you're beyond reproach. Barack Obama was a puppet of white supremacy, and so long as you act on behalf of them, you are one of them. You are one of them, and we treat you like them.
So the thing
that's exactly what I'm saying.
What I wanted to dissuade you from
let me respond.
Is that it will be very misleading to consider a race at the center of the contradiction.
It is. Race is the reason why we suffer where we are right now. There's a reason why slavery existed even before the transatlantic slave trade. White people were enslaving themselves. But there's a reason why the transatlantic slave trade is the worst act of inhumanity in the history of mankind. There's a reason. The transatlantic slave trade was not just slavery. It was a dehumanization. That's the only slavery that it was a dehumanization campaign where black people were stripped off of their humanity, stripped off of their name, stripped off of their culture, stripped off of their aspect of being a man, being a woman.
That kind of expression did not just speak. What about the woman?
Because you're black.
What about the woman? Even the white woman was domiciled. His name was taken. You take the children also took the name for the man. I'm telling you that
like
in terms of exploitation.
Let me finish my point.
First of all,
let me finish my point, Booker, before you go, because I let you go. Let me finish my point, please.
It's impossible to convince me that race can be at the center of our struggle.
I'm not trying to convince you, Booker. Yes. By the way, I'm here because I respect your opinion and I respect my opinion. We are airing our differences and we are letting the viewer pick a side.
Yes, but I do not want the debate to degenerate.
The African viewer.
Yes.
I don't care about non-black viewers. I want to care about the African
viewer. The debate must not degenerate into the promotion of the black nationalism, because I'm not a black nationalist. I'm a Marxist. I am a communist.
It's okay. And I'm a Pan-African nationalist.
So in essence, what we are saying is that from our own perspective, in fact, from our own correct perspective, is that the struggle of the oppressed people, the march to victory of the oppressed people, cannot be cheapened in terms of which race you come from. As long as you're working class, you're a peasant, and you contribute to the building of the global economy, and you do not appropriate any wealth from it, then you have to unite to defeat the primary aggressor for us, which is the United States imperialism.
Please go read the National Security Memorandum written by Henry Kissinger in the 70s when he was Secretary of State. Go also read Global 2000. And there's one document I'll also send you. There are many papers that were written by Secretary of States that were written by powerful white people who are in powerful positions, who have said that we are weakening our agenda. One of our main agenda is we are weakening the black race.
I understand that. That there could be white supremacists advancing the agenda. But what is the moral of what I call the black supremacists also defending the black superiority?
No. But
there's no moral tag.
Again, I'm not a black supremacist. I don't believe.
What is the difference between the blacks? Once you say that the black race is the most privileged in the sense that they created humanity, once you say that it is the most powerful, it is true. In the sense that you are bringing a clear cut that the contradictions in terms of the world is between white and black.
No.
And for me, I cannot do that.
It's okay. Listen, Brother Booker, I'm not saying that we are supreme. I'm just realizing the power in me. I'm just quoting facts, and I'm just.
So where did you get the power from? The melanin of the skin?
No. This is power. This is power, Brother Booker. This is power. I'm realizing the power.
That's delusional.
I'm realizing the power in me. I'm realizing the power that my ancestors had. I'm realizing the power in the African history, in the African present, and in the African future. And I'm utilizing that power to make sure that, number one, we just be independent. That's the number one agenda of the African.
Where does power come from?
Just a bit. Where
do power come from?
Let me finish my point. I'm utilizing, let me repeat it. I'm utilizing my African history, which is the fact that we created humanity and created the greatest civilization of all time. I'm utilizing my African presence and my African future, and I'm utilizing them to ensure that we get our
where
African
has that
independence.
Ideology won in the world? Where is the experiment of black nationalism?
But then again, I'm not a black nationalist. I'm a Pan-African nationalist.
But I'm saying, where has been the experiment being carried out to give dignity? Because all knowledge comes from social practice, even in terms of.
I believe that the greatest person to ever practice Pan-African nationalism is Marcus Garvey. He organized 10 million plus African people globally. He's the only black person that has ever organized 10 million plus black people, exclusively black people globally. Not even people who came afterwards.
What were their successes? What were their successes? Forget about the mobilization. What are their successes?
Well,
because when you're talking about the socialist experiment in the African continent, we can talk of Amilcar Cabral. We can talk about Thomas Sankara.
Oh, yes.
We can talk about, I'm talking about in the African continent. Where is
Marcus Garvey is an African.
Where is the black Pan-Africanism, or being experimented? Who in the African context?
Well, that is the vision that Kwame Nkrumah had when he made the speech.
Kwame Nkrumah was a socialist. He was clearly a communist.
I'm not I don't have I don't have a problem with socialism.
So you cannot talk about.
I don't have a problem.
You cannot talk about
with the sharing of wealth.
No, you cannot talk about black Pan-Africanism and socialism. It's a contradiction in its part.
No.
Because socialism is about sharing of the wealth with those who created them.
I agree.
Black, white, or brown.
No.
But for the black Pan-Africanists, you want to tell me only blacks can have a much of history? No.
Only blacks, only Africans can own Africa 100%. That is what we believe in.
In fact,
that is what we believe in.
In fact,
and just let me finish my point.
Your ideology will continue to be a defeatist ideology in the African continent because it does not mobilize. It actually isolates.
It doesn't isolate. This is the only cure that we can that we can attain African freedom. Because
if it is the only, where has it been proven?
Again, I said it. You interrupted me, but let me finish this point so that I can answer your question.
Where has it been proven in the African continent?
Let me answer it. Marcus Garvey is the greatest.
Where did he implement this idea? Which geographical location?
I'm saying it. I know we are passionate and I know we disagree, but let me finish my point the way I let you finish your point. Marcus Garvey is the greatest black leader that has ever existed. The greatest. And every person that came afterwards learned from Garvey. He organized 10 million. He organized 10 million plus people through the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, UNIA, ACL.
You don't need to be.
There's a reason why Marcus Garvey was able to organize more African people. Wait.
That is not in debate.
Wait. There's a reason why Marcus Garvey organized more black people than any other black freedom fighter.
What about Lejo Maria Ondeto?
Wait.
He had a following of 1 million people.
Wait. I'm answering your question, Brother Booker.
I'm saying about Lejo Maria Ondeto.
No. I mean, I'm talking about Marcus Garvey. You talk about Lejo Maria, I'm talking about Marcus Garvey.
I'm talking about the crude mobilization of people based on their oppression. Even religions have managed to mobilize millions of people.
No.
But have they given them dignity?
You're moving the goalposts. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about the issues of our people and how we can unite. Marcus Garvey.
Where in the geographical, where, for example, if we talk about Marxism and its classical or non-classical aspect, I talk about the USSR experiment. We can talk about its failures and its successes. We can talk about the new China under Chairman Mao.
And
we can talk about the African National Liberation Movement. But the closest in the African continent to your ideology was Senghor.
No. I'm talking about the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey and him practicing Pan-African nationalism through the UNIA. Wait. Which organized 10 million plus African people, which brought the red, black, and green flag that you see every day, which brought the black ships, which owned
nobody's criticizing the Marcus Garvey successes,
which owned many businesses,
but in terms
which created a black economy in the African diaspora.
He did all this.
Who is a businessman? He did all this because
who is a businessman?
Wait. He did all this because there's a reason why Marcus Garvey organized more black people than any other activist being put together. Because his whole ideology.
What about the Shia ideology? His whole
ideology.
Islam from where?
His ideology was number one.
Political Islam has 1 billion people.
Wait. His ideology, my brother, was number one. We are African. We share the same African blood. It doesn't matter whether you're a communist, whether you're a socialist, whether you're a Pan-African nationalist. It doesn't matter whether you're a Christian, Muslim, or anything.
I don't accept that.
We don't discriminate based on ideology and based on religion. We are all African. We all suffer from white supremacy.
This Marcus Garvey ideology.
Where was it implemented? I'm almost finishing. Yeah, but he implemented in Jamaica, but then moved into New York. But then again, what I'm saying is that even if he operated from New York, he was operating from all over the world, because he was organizing people, even the black people in Puerto Rico, the black people in the Dominican Republic. He was organizing black people from Europe, black people from Asia. He was a real Pan-Africanist because he realized that in order to unite African people, let's not fight on who's communist, who's socialist, who's Christian, we all are being oppressed by white supremacy. And nobody likes us. Everybody hates us, Brother Booker. Everybody hates us.
I have met very warm Chinese. I've met very warm white people.
Everybody hates us. Everybody wants to colonize Africa.
That is another narrative.
Everybody wants Africa to themselves, apart from the Africans.
That's another narrative that is not anchored on any scientific evidence. Just saying everybody hates you. I've been in a plane where they're all whites. They didn't kill me.
By saying everybody, I'm talking about a system.
What we are saying is
every racial system outside from the black racial system hates us and wants to exploit us. That's what I'm trying to say.
Any socioanalysis in terms of advancing the dignity of the African race will fail, just like religion failed in African continent.
And you know what? Even your ideology.
As long as, for us, we take experiments.
And
in terms of any counter thesis to capitalism, the only experiment that I've carried out across the world is socialism.
And you know what? History.
In the advance of, tell me any ideology, you are anti-capitalist, you are anti-imperialist.
Yeah.
Tell me any other ideology that has been experimented with dignity across the world. Marxism is less than 200 years. Less than 200 years.
No, so what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that Pan-African nationalism is counterproductive?
It still exists in abstract.
No, it's
it has never been concretized.
And that's why we are here. That's why I'm here. But it was through Marcus Garvey. That's what I'm trying to say. But it was, and
anyway,
it passed.
This debate may not end. Maybe we
but
can
you know what?
Because
I know. We are concluding. I'm trying to say that you black socialists aligning.
I don't consider myself black socialist because blackness and non-blackness.
But you're black, Brother Booker.
Yes, I'm saying it doesn't matter to me.
It should matter. That's what I'm trying to say.
Whether I'm black or white.
But you're black. At the end of the day,
I'm saying it is not a material force.
Okay, fine.
On me.
As a socialist, history will prove you wrong when you align yourselves with Russia and China. Because at the end of the day,
history has not proven us wrong. History has proven us right. It is the socialist experiment that helped the national liberation forces in the African continent.
No, I'm saying history will judge you.
It was not the black nationalists.
No. I'm saying history will judge you. History will judge you harshly in the future with aligning with people who want to colonize Africa.
It's not aligning.
Through Russia and China.
It's not aligning because that is a Western rhetoric that any Marxist in African continent was either, geared towards being a foreign agent or aligning. What we are saying is that we cannot win against United States without tactical alliances. And it has been approved on history. Muammar Gaddafi was murdered here.
Yeah.
No African country, no black person stood to stand with Muammar Gaddafi.
I agree.
He's dead.
I agree.
The Libyan experiment, Pan-Africanism, killed completely.
Mm-hmm.
When we wrote letters to Muammar Gaddafi, what were we advising him? To live beyond the offensive of United States, you must have tactical agreements of the people who can confront the United States.
Mm-hmm.
He's dead. His country has been looted through. Same thing is Eritrea here.
Mm-hmm.
If Eritrea did not take the most magic step to form a tactical alliances, in fact, Eritrea now hosts the Chinese military base. Can you accuse them for hosting Chinese military base? Without Chinese military base in Eritrea, the Eritrea will be bombed to Stone City. What about the Sahel region? When you talk about Africans for Africans, the Sahel region has been plundered by France for almost 80 years. Only this time when Traore took political power through military establishment, why are they surviving? They are surviving because of the Russian arsenal there. If the Russian arsenal is not there, they're going to be bombed tomorrow.
And that's what I'm saying. What needs to happen is that we need to have a Pan-African army that can replace China and Russia.
That is a wishful thing.
It's not wishful until you implement it. It's not wishful until you push for it. The same way you're pushing for your agenda, the same way I'm pushing for mine.
Before the nuclear weapons arsenal went to the United States, before the nuclear weapons went to USSR, or even to the British, somebody else. The theory of an even development is that technology can offshoot anywhere in the world, independent of race. This is important for us to acknowledge, that no technology can be domiciled in form of a race. And we must exploit any technology or any scientific development to defend our people.
And I'm saying we need to develop it on our own.
The issue
and run it on our
saying
own.
That blacks for black people, you're showing the middle finger to the East and everything else. Even in their non-aligned movement. Who was in the non-aligned movement? It was just not non-aligned that it was never aligned for him. It was non-aligned but anti-imperialist.
Oh yeah. And
anti-imperialist. That means it was just not non-aligned.
I'm anti-imperialist.
It was tactical.
Pan-African nationalism is totally against it's totally for anti-imperialism.
So if you are anti-imperialist, then you must accept that the primary enemy is not the white man, but it is the imperialism.
And who is the biggest imperialist, Brother Booker?
United States is the primary aggressor, but it is not the United States working class people. It is not the United States white people.
I agree. It's United States white supremacy, right?
In fact, it is the United States war consensus, particularly the dominance class.
No problem.
In the United States.
That's white supremacy.
Yes, so you cannot
That's what I'm saying.
You cannot tell me that the white truck driver who moves from Puerto Rico or Mexico and drives a truck to New York is our enemy.
No.
I cannot do that.
No, I'm not saying he's our enemy. I'm saying you should not join our movement.
We're not saying join our movement. Fight the primary oppressor at home. We're telling the white people in the United States, join with the black people in the United States, and then oppose the United States imperialism.
Don't join us. You fight white supremacy on your own. I always say this in my show. If white people are so good and they want to help us to fight imperialism, you organize.
Don't force that narrative on me. That the goodness.
I'm not forcing anything on you, Brother Booker. I'm just telling you what I believe in.
The goodness or the badness is not determined by the melanin of the skin.
I agree.
This has to come out clear.
No, I don't agree with that. But then, Brother Booker, I always say this, and this is my final point. If white people are so good and they want to help black people fight white supremacy.
Nobody has said that. That's your own narrative.
It's mine. It's my opinion. If you want to help black people so much, organize amongst you white people and fight white supremacy. Don't come to our movement. It will be even more powerful if they do that on their own. Don't come to us. Don't infiltrate us.
So long as your analysis starts on the wrong premise, you cannot get anything right. This is the thing. As long as you start from the wrong premise, that the black people are most powerful, that they created humanity, and that therefore the black people must isolate themselves from the white people to advance their national liberation and their sovereignty and their self-determination. It is a wrong premise. That will definitely fail because it has never worked. I've never seen. It's not different from saying, let us unite as Kalenjins. It is no different from saying, let's just as
racism and tribalism is different.
It's just the same shade.
No, it's not.
It is not different from saying, let's unite as Islam.
It's not.
As Christian.
Race is deeply rooted in genocide. Race is deeply rooted in stripping of black people's humanity. Tribalism is different. Is way different. And is way more lower than racism. That's what I'm saying. But Brother Booker, we can agree to disagree. We don't have to agree with everything. But one thing we have in common, Brother Booker, is that we are anti-imperialist, we are anti-West, and we want Africa to unite, and we want Africa to be free. How we get to that freedom is different.
Imperialism does not just affect the black people. It affects brown, it affects the colored people, it affects the white people. Imperialism is the powerful triumph on monopoly capital over the dignity.
I agree. But what we Pan-Africanists are saying is that we don't care about you other people. We care about ourselves. You fight for your own community, we fight for our own community. That's all. That's all we are saying.
That is more close to radical individualism among the capitalist conception. In fact, the mercantile capitalism. But for me, I think that we can conclude.
Brother Booker. Thank you so much.
By saying my final remarks.
Please say, but before you do that, I want to say thank you for coming. My show, I always let the guest have the final word, but I always give my final word first and then you close the show. But before you do that, let me just say that, Brother Booker, thank you for coming. We don't have to agree on everything, Brother Booker. We don't have to agree on everything. But the fact that we are sitting down and having a healthy discussion is the best thing that black people can do. The fact that we want Africa to be free and the fact that we want the best for Africa is a good step. Now, how we get there might differ, but at the end of the day, we want Africa to be free. And I think I speak correctly when I say that both of us want Africa to be free. Both of us want the best for Africa, correct? Now, the method may be different, but we want the best for Africa. So, Brother Booker, thank you. Thank you for coming. And I wish we can have a part 2 of this conversation. I wish we can have a part 2 of this debate. Thank you so much for coming. Please give your final word as we close the show. Guys, thank you for coming. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. Where can people support you, by the way? Where can people follow Communist Party Marxist of Kenya and you? Just
first of all,
say it in your...
My first remark is that the enemy of the African people is imperialism in general, but particularly the primary enemy, or what we call the principal enemy of the African people, is United States imperialism as the primary aggressor of the world. Now, when we are having discussions around cross-sectional ideologies. For example, it could be Black Pan-Africanism, it could be Black nationalism, and all other shades. What unites us is anti-imperialism. This is what we must stick, and we must never deviate to things that divide us, because we cannot reconcile the differences on ideology, because ideological issues are based on a certain school of thought, and we study them based on their progress in the society. For us as the Communist Party Marxist Kenya, we correctly take the national liberation from the frontiers of Amilcar Cabral, the frontiers of African revolutionaries that were also Marxist. So indeed, the Communist Party Marxist of Kenya, frontiers at the moment is to mobilize all anti-imperialist forces against United States imperialism as the primary aggressor and their local agents, which is Comprado. And what this show can put forth is the unity of all the anti-imperialist forces in Kenya for the defeat of the home Negroes, or what we call the puppets of the United States interest, against the United States regime. This is my final remark.
Thank you so much, Brother Booker, for coming. Thank you. Good discussion. I wish communists, but are you guys vying for political, for example, are you vying for political, seat in the next election, or your members of the party vying for any seat in the political realm?
For us, it's not an either or. For example, we honestly believe that the bourgeois processes, electoral processes, will not bring revolutionary change. Mm-hmm. But we participate in electoral processes to counter the backward capitalist ideas and also to expand our organization and mobilization among the people. So yes, in the last week, we just published what will be our attitude towards the national elections of 2027 and who will be the enemies of the Kenyan Revolution and the friends of the Kenyan Revolution. In essence, the Communist Party Marxist of Kenya participate in electoral process, not as a strategy for liberating the Kenya, but as a tactic to expand our own organization and to counter the wrong ideas.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Asanteni sana. Thank you.